Jackson Flickinger, special guest here today on the Just Basketball Show. We're going to do a Cavs deep dive, but to hit on the big news in the NBA today, Chet Holmgren is going to be out a while with a pelvic fracture after a pretty nasty fall in the Thunder with Warriors game from the weekend. A lot of injuries in the NBA this year. This, I think, may be the most impactful one at the title race, considering what the Thunder are. With Hartenstein, Jackson already out. How do you view the Thunder adapting here? Like, what is the challenge for them while they have both of their centers, which are going to be a fulcrum of this team this year, now out with injury?
I think it's the hardest position for them to compensate for. One of the things that the Thunder really have is they have a lot of depth. They don't have that same depth up front. I believe that they are talented enough to still, play good basketball, but they're not going to be, arguably the best team in the league when they don't have Chet. So it's a really tough blow because Chet is so important to what they do on both sides of the ball. I think it's easy to overlook him with how good Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is and how good really the whole Oklahoma City process is. But I think Chet is really that, final piece that just unlocks everything.
Yeah, and he was having a great year. I thought was really elevating himself this year. Him being out, I think you nailed it. That's the position where Hartenstein was already sort of like protection against injury to Chet and vice versa, and then both of them are going to be out. And you look at the roster, there's not another obvious starting center on this roster. It's Jalen Williams, not Santa Clara wing Jalen Williams, like the other Jalen Williams. Is he now your starting center? Like, is that where this goes for the next? Are you going to try to do Dieng at the 5? Like, they're going to have Dagnall and that coaching staff. I feel like they're going to have to come with a really bunch of unorthodox solutions to figure this out. And it's because it's like early in the year for 10-day contracts. I don't know if they have anyone they can just waive and go get whatever veteran they would want to get right now, if it's even something they would want to do. This is an incredibly tough spot for a team that's been great start the year. Will be fine, you would think, in the long term, but in how competitive the West is when they are, look, the Thunder are 8-2, and there's a bunch of teams right around them at 7-3, and two other teams in the Warriors and the Suns at 8-2. It's like every game is going to matter for them, and if this was the stretch of the season that bumped them from the 1 seed to like the 3 seed in the long run, and makes their path to the finals like a little bit harder, I think that's entirely possible. That's the net loss here for Chet.
I think one of the things to point out also is that the Suns are going to be without KD for a little bit, and they talk about a team that doesn't have depth. That's a team that really relies on, their best players really, throwing them over the edge. And I think that's a little bit of fool's gold, but I think we don't want to get too off track. But if there is a coaching staff and an organization that you trust to kind of weather the storm better than you would expect them to, it's Oklahoma City. So they've earned the benefit of the doubt from that perspective. So I wouldn't be, I'm not overly concerned about the Thunder overall. And I think that they could still, really come out of this still as, a top 3 team with room to, get back to that 1 spot.
I think that's right. All right, on today's show, it's a Cleveland Cavaliers only show. We're going to start doing deep dives here on the Just Basketball Show, and wanted to start with the last undefeated team. We're recording this on Monday, so maybe they've lost to the Chicago Bulls by the time people listen to this, but a team that has been undefeated to start the year, one of the biggest stories in the league to start the year. Let's dive in to the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Spectacular move by Michael Jordan. LeBron James with no regard for human life.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Just Basketball Show. I'm Chris Manning. Wes Goldberg not here today. We have Jackson Flickinger, editor-in-chief at Fear the Sword, co-host of the Junkyard Dog podcast, contributor. Still contributing over at Right Down Euclid? Is that?
I think that's officially still.
Okay,
officially
it was in your Twitter
still.
bio, but what we're seeing on X these days,
Yeah.
Who knows? But that's all coming up today. Big Cavs deep dive. Before we get into it, I want to tell you about our friends at BetMGM. If you haven't signed for BetMGM yet, use bonus code JustBasketball, and you'll get up to $1,500 in a first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here is how that works. Step 1, you download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android and sign up using code JustBasketball. Step 2, deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. Step 3, you'll receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if that bet loses. Just make sure to use our bonus code JustBasketball when you sign up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older to wager, and terms and conditions apply. We're going to be betting content. I mean, I just want to toot my own horn for a second. I called Cavs over as one of my locks on over-unders, and they're going to smash that. It's like 52 wins or whatever it was, just absolutely crushing it. Jackson, let's get into the Cavs. I'm going to ask you a loaded question to start.
Mm-hmm.
Cavs' big change in the offseason was not a trade of a player. It was not really anything related to the personnel on the roster. They re-signed basically everyone and just are running it back, preaching continuity. The change was J.B. Bickerstaff gone, Kenny Atkinson in. How is it too simple to say that the Kenny Atkinson change in what he has brought to the team was revealed something that was there the whole time? Does this indict JB in some big way? Like, what do you make of how different this team looks and plays with just a new head coach and not new players or anything drastically changed in terms of personnel?
I'm going to say yes and no. I think that
you're hedging out question one. This is great podcasting from you. I'm proud.
I would never. Listen. I have strong takes. Just wait for them. I do think that this is, like Kenny Atkinson has a lot to do with this. If you go to fearthesword.com, you will see that basically every article is about Kenny Atkinson and how great he is. So, I think that he is the number one story of this team, and he is the reason why this team is different. The only reason why I am hedging is I think that the Cavs, some players on the Cavs, specifically Evan Mobley and Darius Garland, are in the right, I think they're in the right spot in their careers for this kind of change. Darius had a really tough year last year. And I think there's a lot of reasons why that was the case, but it was, it was really bad. If that player continued playing that way, you're looking at easily the worst contract in the entire league. He has not been the player he was last year. And I think he needed to go through that to, really accept and buy into Kenny Atkinson's system. And I think Evan Mobley needed to go through that Boston Celtics series where he showed that he could overpower certain matchups and really, gain that confidence that he needed to have this season. So I do think that both of those things happening in conjunction with Kenny Atkinson is what has led to this. So it's like 85% Kenny Atkinson and, 15% the situation.
The modernization, Jackson, of what they've done to me is the story here. It's that they function on offense more than anything else, like a NBA team in 2024. And last year they didn't always. They never did. It was playing very slow. It was really just kind of one note offense a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even if you see certain things that are, staples of offense around the league, but things they did last year, like double drag, which is a set that they ran a ton under Bickerstaff. It's where you have a staggered screen at the top of the key or on the wing, and usually you have a roller and you have someone pop out. Even the different ways and the speed they're running something like that, which last year was just it was like they would run that set and then basically the read would come like after the reaction happened. It was like a full 3-second processing, and now it's like everything is happening at once. Even just that kind of stuff being sped up has made this offense, be more functional. And then you get into relocation of shooters and all that stuff. I think Atkinson, Jackson, just with the way he approaches the game, I think taking stuff from Kerr, I think taking stuff from Ty Lue, being a head coach before, and what we know from his offense when he was with Brooklyn, it feels like just getting this hire right and doing, which probably wasn't the easy decision, which is getting rid of JB, considering the success that he did have. I'm sure that wasn't something they did lightly. To get this right and trust yourself is, I think, really impressive from the front office, from ownership, from everyone on down. And to just kind of actually diagnose what this group could look like with a different offensive vision, to me, is the whole thing. It's like there's a lot in the numbers you can look at and say, okay, I don't know if this is sustainable or if this will hold or whatever it is. We can get into some of that as we go. But I think the baseline we have learned about how this team is going to play through the first 11 games that in itself is made the coaching hire, made the coaching switch all the worth it. Just the process for this team is just night and day improved.
And I think you can go into the X's and O's and talk about how, Kenny has unlocked Evan Mobley as a ball handler and has really forced Darius Garland to do his work off ball and his rotations and all that stuff. And those are all things that are worth going into. But I think what has set Atkinson apart is kind of how he just seems to like really have his finger on the pulse of his team. And I think that came through most in the most recent win against the Nets. I think that, as odd as it may sound, I think that was their most impressive win from a certain perspective, because they played it was the second night of a back-to-back. They played against the Warriors. It was a big emotional win. They come out against the Nets. They are flat. Nothing is working. They're able to kind of hang around in the game, and then Kenny Atkinson just does something unconventional. He decides to bench Jared Allen. He benches Dean Wade. He benches Isaac Okoro. He says, hey, we're going to go with 4 guards and have 1 center, and we're just going to make it work. And he did that halfway through the fourth quarter when they were losing. The first 2 defensive possessions, the Nets grabbed offensive rebounds because they were the bigger team. And they scored 5 points off of that. And he called a timeout, and it was like, okay, now he's going to go back to a more traditional lineup. But he didn't. He decided to, he never played this 4-card lineup before, but for whatever reason, he just felt that it was going to work. And then they go on a huge run. They win the game. The Nets only score 4 points in the final 4 minutes. That is just kind of the stuff that Kenny just has his finger on the pulse, where he's a great X's and O's guy, but he just knows what this team needs. And every single button he's pushing is working.
I think the guy, Darius Garland, who just won Player of the Week, is I think the guy that maybe most epitomizes that, right? I think you can make a case for Evan Mobley as well, and we'll get into his leap. But Jackson, I think Darius Garland's return to form cannot be overstated, like how needed it was. I think for both him as just the guy finding his footing again, but also like when he is playing with confidence and he is aggressive the way he's been this year. And last year he was really beat up. And this year so far, knock on wood, he's been fully healthy as far as we know. You still would have big picture, I think, Celtics playoff series questions about, how do they guard bigger teams when they have two smaller guards? I think those are as long as you play them together, those things are never going to go away. But this is the version of Darius Garland that can be an awesome fit with Donovan Mitchell. That is an awesome fit with Donovan Mitchell. And we didn't see that up until like this very moment. Like this is the first time it feels like, for whatever reason, whether it's coaching, whether it's his health, whatever the combination of the things are, how you break it down, this is the moment that this feels like this is finally the version of Garland that can coexist with Mitchell. And that's also fits right into T with what Kenny wants to do. And however that happened, it's a really big deal.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to say, like, people are saying Darius Garland is back. And it's like, Darius Garland is not back. He's considerably better than he's ever been at any point in his career. And I think some of the late game situations really illustrate this. I was going back and watching, he outdueled Dame the beginning of last week, hit a big 3 to win the game. And going back and watching that, one of the things that stands out is just every time he's receiving the ball, especially off like dribble handoffs, even coming around screens, there's just a forcefulness to his game that has never been there before. He's always been somebody who's been a little methodical and tried to like create little angles as opposed to just attacking and then creating his angles and his shot that way. And he was able to do that against the Bucks. And, they were playing for him to hit the step back. And when they took one step too far up, he went into the lane and got the easy basket there. And when they dove back into the lane, he just took the step back 3. So it's a version of Garland that we've literally never seen before. And I think that's what's so exciting, because last year they had that 18-2 stretch, and that was mainly because Donovan Mitchell was playing like an MVP candidate during that stretch. As good as Garland has been, he hasn't been that level, which I think that's kind of encouraging for the overall process is that they're like, this is just a good team and every single player is just elevating them up just a little bit more over the edge.
He is at 48% from three on the year, 44.7% off the bench. Those are numbers that are probably going to come back to earth in some way. And yet Jackson would look at what he's doing this season, the way he's passing, the way he's playing with tempo, the way he's even defending with effort, even if he's not a lockdown defender, like the way he's engaged on that end of the floor and not, getting
the off-ball defense is good. Like,
go off. Talk about it. Go off on
like
it.
So one of the things that we've seen from Donovan Mitchell, especially last year, is he kind of started to understand the defense and would read the passing lanes and really just create havoc there. Now you're seeing Darius Garland do that too. There was a play at the end of the Nets game where he, I forget, I think it was Claxton had the ball. Yeah, like he was in the post against Evan Mobley, and Darius just comes down and strips the ball. It ended up being a jump ball, and those are the things that you never saw him be an active defender. And I remember on media day, or I think it was when Kenny Atkinson was hired, he said, I've always thought Darius Garland was a plus defender, and I'm excited to work with him on that end. And I almost fell out of my chair because I was like, are we talking about the same Darius Garland? And for whatever reason, he like manifested that.
Maybe the most underrated part of the Atkinson hire is that he's a point guard whisperer. Like, that is a thing that if you look at what he did in Brooklyn, that's maybe the biggest takeaway of what he did with that team is that Spencer Dinwiddie and D'Angelo Russell were arguably at the peak of their values with him as their head coach, and he brought something kind of scary out of them, and it said, what if you give him Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland to do stuff with? Just a thought. How you're up close covering this team, Jackson. What has Garland, if you compare his mood last year versus this year, does he seem like he's in a different headspace at all when you think about how he's approaching this year?
I would say yes, because the results on the court seem to back that up. But he's always kind of been a little bit moody of a person.
He's aloof. I think he's aloof. Let's go with reserved.
Sure.
I don't know if we know him well enough to say.
Yeah.
moody.
So I wouldn't say there's like a dramatic difference, but I think the difference is on the court in how he's actually like playing. Like, he's playing with the energy that he didn't have. And I think that also stems back to playing around 30 minutes a game as opposed to the 36, 37 minutes a game that he's played the entire time he's been in the league. I think that, that adds up. And I think when he's able, one of the things that Atkinson has done a good job is expanding the rotation, and everybody, when they're coming in, they're flying around. They're not just kind of trying to, save something in the tank for the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and I think even just the energy that, like, it feels like even if you could still, you're going to see at times this year, particularly in the playoffs, them slow it down again, kind of just by how basketball works in April and May. Even I feel like the way I feel like every player in this team, Garland maybe more than anyone, has benefited from the tempo they're playing at and benefited from just like moving, because it just allows for a little more freedom. It allows for a little more zhuzh on what they're doing. So I think that's I think pretty notable as well. Jackson, let's get to Evan Mobley next, but I got to tell everyone about our friends at Homage first. Homage is the ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company with NBA and WNBA licenses. They uses vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and popular culture. Use the link below to make your purchase and support the Just Basketball Show. They have a great starter collection right now for the NBA, pullovers, jackets, anything you could want for most of your favorite NBA teams. They're going to have it. They have a particularly cool Cavs windbreaker from Starter that I would recommend checking out. And if you're a Celtic fan listening to this, they have a very cool Starter 18-time world champ jacket that if I was a Celtics fan would immediately be buying that jacket. So go check that out. Use our link below. Support the Just Basketball Show. All right, let's go to Evan Mobley, because Jackson, the framing on him that I have read a couple places that I agree with is that while the three-point shot leap hasn't happened in the way you would think it might have based on the first couple games, he has been better at literally everything else, and thus I don't care that he's not shooting threes.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I think it's easy to say, it's easy to just look at basketball and say like the really simple thing, like Evan Mobley needs to shoot threes. And if you were going to play him in the JB Bickerstaff offense for the rest of his career with Jared Allen, he would need to have to shoot threes. But one of the things that the Cavs are doing a great job of is doing so much cutting off ball that it's made it seem like there's more space on the court than there actually is. And I know that I'm not going to be able to articulate it in a way that I think is great for like an audio, forum. But that's one of the things with the offense that has really helped. And then also just having him handle the ball just so much more, I think is just really helping him. And they're giving him the freedom to do that. I go back to the second half of the Warriors game. It seemed like, they were up by 40 at halftime. So it felt like garbage time for a lot of the second half. And the Cavs, for the most part, played pretty bad and kind of treated it like garbage time. But one of the things that I really liked about that is that they just let Evan Mobley just handle the ball so much. And it's like, hey, we're going to give you the room for you to operate and kind of discover your powers. And we know that even if there's going to be some bumps along the way, we're going to be better off for it. And I think that's just that freedom and confidence. When you talk to people who have played under Kenny Atkinson, one of the things that they say is that he instills so much confidence in them. Like every single player has said that. And I think you're kind of seeing that with Evan Mobley because he is just, doing things that he wouldn't normally do.
He has always, I think, had this in him, right? Like that's kind of I think the frustrating part of the last couple of years for me in watching him, Jackson, is that this is a guy who I felt always had some of this there. Some of this does feel like it is just him playing with an edge, with aggression, with force. That I know that's a simplistic way of framing this, but I think there is a lot of truth to it, right? I think there's a lot of truth to Evan Mobley maybe being more comfortable in year 4. He's got the contract solidified, and he's just grown up and he's gotten bigger, and he just feels like he can play with his oomph. But the things that he is doing at a high level, the block to seal the Nets win, for instance, the bringing the ball up the floor, the way he is even, I think, just at time, like you can see him getting comfortable backing guys down in the post. Even if the shots don't always end up coming out looking clean yet, like he has improved at that. And he doesn't bounce off of guys anymore. At least he's getting somewhere when he does that. All of that stuff are things that I think we all thought he was going to be great at. It almost feels like because of the way the league has shifted, and I think because of Chet and Wemby to some degree, he almost gets like forgotten about a little bit as a guy that could be like this massive difference maker as a modern 5. He might not look the same as those guys. He's not as big as them. Doesn't shoot the way they theoretically do. At least in the case of Wemby, Chet, obviously a more refined shooter already. But he is going to be that kind of impact guy, and I don't know how we would rank like the 4 guys on this team this year, but I think there's a case he's either the first or the second best one to me. I know who I think 4 is, but I think he's either 1 or 2.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the thing is that for like the Cavs to work, you kind of want a muddy hierarchy. You don't want it to be like this is Donovan Mitchell's team and everybody else kind of gets in line. And that's not a shot at Donovan Mitchell at all. I think he is phenomenal. But you just need everybody to kind of be their best version of themselves. Like that was the idea when you brought all 4 of these guys together. And one thing that I think is, when you talk about Chet and Wemby, I think it's really easy to picture what the best version of themselves looks like because it's like, oh, they can shoot. They can fit anywhere. Like any team could use a freakish stretch 5. But that's not who Evan Mobley is. And I don't think that Evan Mobley's ever going to be like a, pure stretch 5. But one of the things that Kenny Atkinson has brought up, and, it always sounded weird to me, especially in the beginning, just like, when he was talking on that media day about, Darius Garland's defense, he's always brought up, he coached Brook Lopez, he coached Al Horford, 2 guys who took leaps as 3-point shooters when they were with Kenny Atkinson. But he never brought up either of those guys when talking about Mobley. He always brought up Draymond Green. He always was like Draymond Green, his ability to handle the ball, his ability to understand the game, his passing ability. It doesn't really matter that he can't shoot because he can do so many other things to like offset that. And I thought it was really interesting after the Warriors game, Draymond brought up the same thing, he was saying that they're using so many similarities to them, except for instead of having, Draymond Green play the Draymond Green role, they have a 7-footer playing that role instead. And he was just saying how that's, unbelievable that you can like have somebody in that role. So I think that's maybe a better comparison almost, is like a version of Draymond Green that is more, that is 7 feet tall instead.
When you on a side note of this, Jackson, when you looked at how the one thing Kenny has continued that I think is about Mobley a little bit and Allen a little bit is how much he is still staggering the main four.
Yeah.
What do you make of the continuation of that, and considering the fact that like the lineups with 2 or 3 starters play much more than the starting 5, or that they closed the last 21 minutes of the Nets game really without the starters? Like, what do you make of the fact that the starters, even with how good this team has been, still are kind of I don't know if worked around is the right phrase, but it is like there's something interesting going on there.
I've been somebody who says that like the starters need to improve, or specifically their 4 best players of Mobley, Garland, Allen, and Mitchell, a group that Chris affectionately calls the core 4. Those all need to improve.
Here's the thing. I you're saying that in jest. I did ask a friend to rank the core 4 on Saturday, Jackson, and I asked them why they didn't put Sam Merrill in there and not Jared Allen. So I feel like I was doing your work in that case.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. You're welcome.
I mean, I think he's the core 1, so I don't think he deserves that.
I mean, like we're not gonna talk about him in detail, but like, and as a side note to all of this, as like an addendum to all of this, Kenny Atkinson just embracing Sam Merrill and playing him a ton is like also an indictment on Bickerstaff not seeing the vision of just playing Sam Merrill.
Also, Sam's not really playing well, but that's like he's not playing phenomenal, but he is like he's playing well enough, and he's still getting by.
The shots that he's taking are very clearly shots that in like 2 weeks I think are just going to go in.
Mm-hmm.
Like he because of the way he does and what he does, he is the most like regress like fall back to the mean of what he is and go on like an insane hot streak from 3 over like a 3-week run. It's gonna happen. It's just a matter of time. It will happen.
To get us back on track.
Yeah, sorry.
I do have I am not really concerned about the quote unquote core 4 right now. Just because the lineup data has been pretty good. So far they're in the 77th percentile in net rating with a +8. They have a 119.3 offensive rating, which is in the 80th percentile, which is insane to think about because even when the Cavs were playing much better with their 4 guys, the first year after the Mitchell trade, it wasn't because the offense was like through the roof. And the caveat is they don't have Max Strus. They've been trying to fit Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade into that 5th spot. And, we can digress and talk about Isaac Okoro, your favorite player, but I don't think
he's not on the list. We don't need to get to
that's
him,
good.
I do like Okoro.
But neither one of them, I feel like, have been a super clean fit with that group. The best player who has been with that group is Karis LeVert. But you're not really going to mess with that. You're not going to put Karis LeVert in the starting lineup because Karis has been absolutely phenomenal off the bench. Somebody who sneaky 6th man of the year candidate. So all that is to say that they're playing well together and they don't have they're not playing their optimal 5th players next to them. Like if you wanted to maximize this group right now, you would put Karis LeVert. You would start Karis LeVert. When Max Strus comes back, he's going to fit in perfectly, or he's going to fit in much better with this group than either Okoro or Wade did. And all the things that you said about Sam Merrill, I think kind of apply to Max Strus in that this Kenny Atkinson system theoretically should help him, as much as it's helped everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's right. Would you start Dean Wade, Isaac Okoro, or Max Strus when Strus is back? Which is
I would.
which is still like what 3-4 weeks off at this point, I think.
Yeah, we're looking at the re-evaluation at the beginning of December. As somebody who wrote like 19 articles in the summer about how you should start Dean Wade no matter what, I'm going to say they need to start Max Strus. So
Okay, I think that's even different from when I asked you about this last time I saw you in person. So
Yeah.
it's you're evolving in real time.
Yeah.
Let's get into Donovan Mitchell, Jackson. One last sponsor I got to tell people about. That's eBay. eBay has been a fantastic partner for the Just Sports Podcast Network this year, partnering with Just Baseball on 3 incredible events from spring training to the All-Star Game to Wild Card Weekend. Tanner Bybee on the Just Baseball show, by the way, a very good listen for you Gardos fans out there. We want to shout out the Game Time Gets collection, which along with career benchmarks, league-wide records, and single-game achievements that will trigger them to drop can be viewed at ebay.com/GameTimeGets. Bidding for each card starts at 24 cents as an homage to the game's 24-second shot clock. Some amazing ones on there. LeBron's 1,500 career games played. Durant hitting 35 in a game this year. You got, rookies, if you love them, as a Reed Shepherd hits 3 threes in a game autograph, one in there that if you're a Rockets fan or interested in Reed Shepherd, that's there. So go check all those others. Donovan Mitchell autograph one in there as well. So go check those out, ebay.com/GameTimeGets. Okay, Jackson, Donovan Mitchell. Stats are down, and I think that feels intentional. I think the way that they are using him, the way that he has ceded some of the control and the power on this team, playing lower minutes per game than he's ever played before, all feels very intentional. He's going to come out this year still averaging he's averaging 22.5 right now. If that holds, it would be the second lowest of his career. Only his rookie year when he averaged 20.5 did he average less. And yet, I think he's going to be better off for it in the long run. I think he's still going to be an all-star, and I still think you're going to have a run where he's rips off like 3 40-point games in a row. What do you make of just how they've used Mitchell and how it feels like they are, to some degree, keeping him not in reserve, but like kind of trying to intentionally keep his energy a little bit higher?
I mean, I think it's smart. He's went into both playoffs with Cleveland a little banged up, and it's easy to see how that's happened because they were relying on him heavily in both of the last 2 seasons. Last season, they didn't really have an alternative. They weren't relying on him heavily. They would have been a play-in team, considering the injuries that they had. But I think it's definitely really helping him. I think that he's done a good job of picking and choosing his spots of like, okay, now I'm going to give it a little extra. Now I'm going to see control of the offense. You saw that Lakers game that they had a few weeks ago. He came out, scored 17 points in the first quarter, really sending a message like, hey, this is, I'm not going to lose to LeBron James in Cleveland. And then, the Bucks game where he hit the game winner, he was incredible down the stretch. He closed out the Pelicans on the road by going off in the fourth quarter. So you're seeing those things, but you're also seeing him say, hey, this 2-man game that Ty Jerome and Darius Garland are working, let's keep doing that because it's great. So that's one of the things that, has really allowed this team to flourish is Donovan Mitchell's willingness to kind of see the bigger picture on this. And I think that there is still a little bit of an adjustment that he will need to keep taking with his team. I don't think we're necessarily seeing the best version of Donovan Mitchell. You're seeing a very good version. He has incredible shooting numbers, so he's been really efficient. But I think there's still like a little bit more juice that Kenny is going to be able to squeeze out of Donovan Mitchell-led lineups.
I mean, I think there's just like another guy who I think if Garland cools off or whatever, and LeVert cools off because LeVert's had a great start to the year as well.
LeVert's not going to cool off. This is who he is.
Kenny Atkinson, Karis LeVert is just a different NBA player. We lest I forget. Sorry about that, Karis LeVert.
He should tie the Karis LeVert. I mean, he should tie the Kenny Atkinson. At least 10%.
Yeah. His agent's got to be like, hey. Last year, I know it's a contract year for Karis as well. It's got to be like, hey, can we just get a contract that is like, we'll take a little less to stay here in Cleveland, stay with Kenny. I'm from Columbus. The Cavs love to remind people that he's from Ohio. Not that he went to Michigan, but that he went to Ohio.
Whoa,
He's from
don't say
Ohio.
that. Don't say that.
That he went to Michigan?
Yeah, don't say that. You don't need to bring that
Wait,
up.
he spurned Ohio University, so I have feelings. The fact, like, when those guys like maybe normalize a little bit, I kind of just expect that's when Donovan goes on a run where he's like, all right, I'm averaging 30 a game for the next 2 weeks. Like, that feels
Yeah.
like just a market correction where he gets back to being the clear lead guy, even if he already still feels like that now, but like the stats end up reflecting that, and that just, it feels like he will sustainably be able to maybe hold that a little bit more than he did the last couple of years when it was even Jackson, something like Evan Mobley brings up the ball, Isaac Okoro brings up the ball. Pick someone who isn't Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell brings up the ball on a fairly regular basis on this team now. When last year, if they got to stop, got to rebound, it was give it to Mitchell, give it to Garland, and they take to 16 seconds on the shot clock to get above half court. That was, I think, somewhat a style choice, but it was also like, I think, an energy. That was like how they were conserving energy,
Right.
and they decided that was a better way than attacking with different guys. The attacking with different guys one just happens to work a lot better because you have skilled enough guys to do it. Is how I
Right.
read it. And Mitchell is a guy that, look, we know how this works. He did have to sign off on this to some degree. His extension, him, I think, publicly backing Kenny in what they've done and talking through with him this summer, I think has gone a long way to making this work. If Mitchell was unhappy with this, you wouldn't see this working the way it does. I firmly believe if he would just wrest some of the control back his way, and this would look a little bit differently.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, but I do also think that there is still some more off-ball work that he can do that he's currently not. Like, I think Darius has been a really impactful off-ball player, and I think Donovan has tried to be a more impactful off-ball player, but that's naturally not a part of his game. So I think that there is still just a little bit more there, possibly, where he can, I don't want to say he can fit in better because that makes it sound like he's not currently fitting in, because he is fitting in because, this team is really good and Donovan Mitchell has played great. He won Eastern Conference Player of the Week before this last one. So, but I just think that there is a little bit more there to get out, and not just saying that he's going to get more touches and naturally do Donovan Mitchell things that we've seen him do since Utah. I think he's going to be just a little more effective in how this offense is currently running.
And here, Jackson, the start, the way the rest of the league has looked, what does this mean? What does this tell you about the Cavs ceiling, where they fit in the East? What has this, in your mind, has this start surged them up a level, and where does it put them in the NBA title contention tier if they're there for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they are firmly in that tier. It kind of depends on if you think that the Celtics are in a tier of their own or not. If you're putting, I think the three teams of Oklahoma City, Boston, and Cleveland are the best team so far. I think you could argue that the Celtics, just because they were champions and because we know what they do works, even if I personally don't endorse it. We know that it works. So I think that they kind of deserve to be like a tier above those two teams. But I think those two teams are the best challengers right now. And just with the way the league is trending, I think that this winning with depth thing, winning with having groups and lineups that you can shift to multiple different styles, I think that's the new paradigm shift in this league. But I think so, I think they're right there. I mean, if they were to play the Celtics in a series, I wouldn't pick the Cavs, but I wouldn't, at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if, they won in a 7-game series. And that is kind of shocking to say, considering where things were 2 months ago.
Yeah, look, I think if they played Boston in a series, you'd have to give Boston the advantage, not just because they won the title last year, but they have a size advantage, and that is going to matter in a playoff series. How the Cavs navigate that, even if they did play Boston, I think, tough in the second round last year, how you combat that team is something they have to prove. They have to show that they can do this, not just in the look. This is November 11th when we're having this conversation. We're months and months away from knowing exactly what this looks like. There's a lot that is going to change, a lot that is going to happen, a lot to figure out. I think this playoff year will still feel like massively pressure filled when they get there. I think that is unavoidable, and it makes the season and the start really fascinating because they've come out of the gates better than I thought. They've outperformed all the teams you would think they're in competition with. Other teams have had injuries. Philly's just a mess right now. The Bucks are bad. Paolo has this oblique injury that has really derailed the Magic. I mean, that Cavs Magic game in Cleveland, Jackson, was such a bummer because I wanted to see Paolo in that game, and it ended up being like Jalen Suggs had a big night, but he was like they were running one action to get him looks, and it's like this is telling me nothing. There's nothing to learn here.
Yeah,
and it was hard to watch. It just wasn't good basketball. And
Darius played good though.
Darius did play really well. And how they attacked the Magic guards, I thought was maybe the most notable part of that because that's independent of Paolo. But like the Magic and how they will score now was tough.
Yeah.
But I think if you don't come away from I do think that if you look at the start and the way they're playing and what is working and how they've improved and what Atkinson is doing, and you don't say, okay, I still think they're my favorite to win the title or they're going to be Boston or whatever it is. I think if you aren't taking this team a little bit more seriously, I think that's on you, and that is just like some predetermined bias. Is it possible, Jackson, we get to the end of the playoffs, and they get a tough first-round matchup or a tough second-round matchup, and this team, as I've seen people compare them to like Mitchell's Jazz teams that were great in the regular season and couldn't get it done. I think it's totally possible that that's like an outcome. But I think they're showing that there's more here, and there was a lot more here that was untapped the year before that is finally now coming out, and that in itself is worth, I think, taking in and processing.
One thing that I like about this team more than like the Jazz teams, because I think that's a good comparison point, because I think those Jazz teams were better than any of the previous Cavs teams with Mitchell were, is that the Jazz were kind of playing a worse version of what the best teams were playing, whereas the Cavs, and I think this is kind of, we wanted to get derailed into a Knicks conversation where the Knicks are kind of trying to play a worse version of what the Celtics do. The Cavs aren't trying to be the Celtics. Like they don't play the same style. They're unapologetically themselves. And I think there's reason to be skeptical about a too big lineup, about the depth, about the small backcourt. Those things are all valid, but I like the ceiling on this team just because they know who they are and they keep becoming increasingly better versions of themselves that fit within each other, and they have depth that allows them to play a lot of different styles. And I think that is something that this team didn't have before, even though they had the recipe to have that.
Yes. The last thing I will ask you, Jackson, is when you think about where this team is going and what they are and what this roster kind of shows, is there anything that stands out to you as a particular weakness? Considering their record, it's hard to like nitpick too much, but is there anything you're looking at and saying this is the one thing during the stretch that I'm kind of looking at to see how it unfolds over the next 10, 20 games and maybe even longer?
I think you still want to see the four players play better together. I think it's tough because of when you don't have Strus, they don't really have a super clean fit in that spot. So I would like to see that get a little better. It's not that they've I read the numbers earlier. They've been great. It's just that if you're talking about like title teams, their best four players are a step above great. So can the Cavs get there with their four best players on the court? That's something to watch out for. And I do think that this team could use another person at the four, whether that's a 3-4 or a 4-5. I think they need somebody else there. You look at those, Niang and Wade minutes. I'm a big believer in Dean Wade, but I think that he's had some injury issues that makes you think that, can you count on him? And George Niang, I think he's bought in really well to Kenny Atkinson's system and has fit in a lot better than I anticipated. But I still wouldn't want to run him out in a playoff lineup. So those are two things that I would circle as, can they improve at that position? And can they, keep coalescing with their four best players?
Yeah, I think that's all right. And I think, too, just seeing how – look, at some point they are going to, like, lose a game. It could be the Monday we're
Maybe.
talking. It could be they're, like, odds are, Jackson, like, they're going to lose a game, and it's just going to be because, like, they're, like, tired. If more than like, I thought they were going to lose that Nets game before they came back. I was like, okay, they just hit a wall, and the Nets are playing really feisty under Jordy Fernandez, and, like, they're figuring something out. The Cavs then proved us wrong. But, like, at some point they're just going to, like, lose a random game.
Yeah.
And over the big picture, when, like, things start, like, teams scout them better and adjust, how they adjust back, I think will be fascinating. Because if you could, I think probably fans' number one complaint about JB Bickerstaff was the lack of adjustments a lot of the time. That felt like the thing that people got most mad at him about.
And
Fair or not, like, yeah. Probably, like, sometimes, like, a little overdone, but like in the macro sense, I think true is what I would say.
I would agree.
I think Kenny has a reputation of being a better adjuster. Big picture, what his in-game stuff in the playoffs. I'd have to go back and, like, think about the Nets games and read stuff. I don't know, but I do think when there's an adjustment is demanded of them, how they adjust will tell us a lot. I can't wait to. I want to see them go through, like, some struggle, because that's when we're gonna actually learn a little bit more. Like, I think we've learned a ton during the first 12 games. The next way to learn about this team is if they can have, like, a sludgy stretch where they go through some muck against good teams. Like, that's the next, I think, level to us learning about. If you look at the schedule.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I'm excited.
This week's not the week is basically what I'm.
No.
It's, the Bulls, the Sixers, and the Bulls again. Hornets are solid on Sundays. Hornets Celtics is something.
I mean, the Celtics are something, yeah. I'm excited for the in-season tournament for this team. I would like to see them advance, and they're in the same group as the Celtics, so that's going to be tough. But I would like the in-season tournament, I think, is, especially that first game against the Celtics, which is next Tuesday. There should be an increase. I would think that there's going to be an increased level of scouting there that you wouldn't get for a normal Tuesday matchup in the regular season. So I would like to, I think it would be good in the long run if the Celtics were able to maybe expose some things, just so you could get an idea of what this looks like and what adjustments that this team can make. So I've circled that game, and then I've also circled, like, the in-season tournament as a whole, not necessarily, like, the group games against the Bulls and the Hawks, the Wizards
on December 3rd. Yeah.
Yeah. Not circling that one, but if they were able to get out of the group stage, just kind of how do they look when teams are, it's not playoff preparation, but it's a step above regular season preparation. And that's kind of all you can ask for at this time of the year.
Yeah, and look, I would say December's we're a little ways away from December, obviously, but that month has Boston to start the month. It has the Nuggets twice. It has the Heat in Miami. It has the Warriors on the road. It has the Lakers on the road. It has the Mavericks on the road, and then you get the Thunder right after the New Year. Those are the Mavericks and the Thunder game, like, both right after the New Year. That's a good month where you're going to get 5-6 really good teams during that stretch. Those are games to zero in on and think about and dial into in a real way. But that's going to do it for the Just Basketball show for Tuesday, November 12th. Jackson, give your plugs up before we get you out of here.
Go to fearthesword.com. I have a lot of stuff up. I have an article that I wrote about how the Warriors have talked about Kenny Atkinson. I think that's a really cool story. And so go to fearthesword.com. And then the Junkyard Pod, I host that with Tony Pesta and Corey Walsh. Both are contributors at Fear the Sword. It's a Cavalier podcast. So if you want more stuff about the Cavs, that's a good place to go.
Go check that out. We'll be back later this week. Wes will be back. We're going to have an episode up on Thursday here on the Just Basketball Show feed. All our normal content elsewhere as well. Until next time, thanks everyone for tuning in. Shout out BetMGM, shout out Homage, and shout out eBay for sponsoring today's show. We'll talk to you all next time.